I thought it was kind of great that like we got so many goals, treated to so many goals. I mean, most of the favorites won, right? Except for I think Stuttgart. All the other ones that we kind of tipped to, settle into the top four this year, all have like basically gotten the results that we thought they would get. As we record this, I have St. Pauli and Heidenheim in the background, and wow, what a day they are having for the Bundesliga returning to Hamburg. The Milan tour just looks absolutely stunning, and it just made me think it's really nice just, that they're opening this in like the summer months still, when like this gorgeous weather is still out and you kind of move into fall, and it's just, it just feels kind of like, makes you wholesome again, Stefan. That's kind of how I've been feeling this entire weekend. And then of course we've been treated to so many good matches. I think the one really big takeaway, and this kind of leads us maybe right into the first match that we want to discuss, is that a lot of the sites that I watched just did not look like a finished product at all yet, right? I mean, there's definitely a case to be made that some of these games still feel like preseason games. It's just not, the mechanisms aren't quite there yet. There isn't quite every pass, it isn't quite where it's supposed to go. You can tell that some of these new pieces aren't quite there yet. And that is actually maybe a good intro into what we just witnessed, which is this Bayern game, right? This 3-2 win over Wolfsburg. And I don't know, the first half felt like a total preseason game to me, where one side got the goal, that's Bayern Munich, Musiala, right? Nice assist by Sasha Boy, but this Wolfsburg team didn't really show up until the first 10 minutes of the second half. And even Bayern, even though they got the lead, that first half just felt like it was running at a very slow kind of summer stroll kind of pace. Really picked up in the second half. I thought the second half was really good by both teams, actually, in parts of the entertainment, not maybe in terms of how both teams played, because it was just utter chaos. But, that too is such an interesting takeaway. It just doesn't seem like either one of those sides had any structure yet. And I think that is something that we really need to break down as we go into these games that we're going to discuss for this show, that a lot of what we've seen doesn't seem like the final product yet, Stefan.
Yeah, that definitely seemed the case in the Bayern game. I think if you're a hopeful Bayern fan, you'd probably look at that game and think, wow, that wasn't perfect, but hey, we picked up 3 points. There were some positives, but it just shows that, Kompany has a long way to go. Before, not only just in terms of, getting this team to play really well and to kind of get Bayern back to the level that fans want to see from them in the Bundesliga, which is going to teams like Wolfsburg, who historically don't really cause them too many issues, and win these games comfortably, which they certainly did do on Sunday. And to me, it felt very much like the same from last season, more of the same from last season, which is exactly the opposite of what Bayern have been trying to find themselves stuck with after a summer transfer window, which they've tried to do their best to kind of bring in new players and make new changes and kind of really revolutionize his team. But as we kind of talked about on one of the previous shows last week, when we talked about the kind of top teams in the league this season, Bayern's summer window has been limited, and I think that came across in this this game. You only have to look at, well, I don't really know where to start with it, to be honest with you, but it definitely wasn't a vintage Bayern performance. And even you could certainly look at some performance, for example, like I thought Michael Olise was very good in the first half. I think he kind of really began to kind of tail off in the second half, which suggests that he's not maybe fully fit. The fact that Serge Gnabry was starting over other players. Yes, he gets a goal, and maybe people who missed a game maybe thought, well, that seemed like Gnabry's off to a good start. But goal aside, I actually thought he was quite poor. Kane missed a few chances. I think you could probably argue the Wolfsburg goalkeeper had to pull off a number of great saves. And yeah, it didn't really feel like Bayern have really clicked into gear just yet. But I guess the question mark is how much of that's down to players who are either not fully fit or yet to reach their potential. or players that the club are still relying on who just simply maybe aren't up to scratch? And I think those question marks perhaps are most pertinent with that backline, which really seemed to dog Bayern throughout the game, and caused issues where there really shouldn't have been any issues. Because as you said correctly, Wolfsburg were pedestrian, uninterested, completely, I wouldn't say blown away by Bayern, but just playing, as you would say, playing the badge rather than the man in this game, where they said, okay, Bayern are here, we lose to Bayern, let's just get this game over and done with. And to Ralph Hasenhüttl's credit, he was, as I said in our chat, he was apoplectic for much of the game on the sideline, and it's clear that he gave them the old hair dryer routine, where he really did just seem to go through that squad at halftime, because they came out and they really caught Bayern on the break. Obviously, the penalty call, which, as we discussed in the group chat, was probably quite dubious, to be honest with you, but it's still a play that completely caught Bayern off guard. And then, not so long after that came who, I mean, we can obviously get into discussion with in time, then basically throws the ball away a few minutes later, and all of a sudden Wolfsburg are in a game which they had no hope or no right to be in. And if I was a Bayern Munich fan, that would be kind of set off alarm bells for me, because that's exactly what we saw time and time again last season from them, where in attack they look okay, key players like Musiala, Harry Kane stepping up, but it just kind of felt like only a matter of time before the opposing team would go up the other end of the pitch and score a goal from a mistake or from just some poor defending. And unfortunately, that's exactly what we got on Sunday.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think what I thought was really interesting is that Wolfsburg, they got that penalty, and then it was almost like they woke up and realized, hey, we can actually win this game. It's this Bayern team isn't the Invincibles of the past, right? That just show up and do a tour of the Autostadt, get these 3 points, and go back home, hopefully on an ICE that actually stops in the city. And this time around, it was almost like, that's how the game started. And then they kind of, Kabara really kept them in. I had a goalkeeper, by the way, who I thought really struggled with the face mask, and despite that, did quite well. But you could see that his timing was just slightly off, and a lot of the stops that he made, and that the fact that he still managed to make them is actually very impressive. But yeah, it was almost like in the second half they woke up and realized that, this Bayern team is for the taking. And you kind of wonder if you, one of these other managers in the Bundesliga, and you look at this game and said, well, if Wolfsburg had maybe played the full 90 minutes, and if they had maybe been a bit more consequential in their defending, if they had been a bit more aggressive in the attack from the start, they would have probably gotten a result there. And the 3-2 maybe sums it up for me, where Kaminski does a really poor job trying to get in front of Harry Kane, and then gets wrestled off, right? And that's really where the goal starts, right? And shortly after, it's in the back of the net, and Bayern win the game. Behrens, of course, he misses a big chance, and as you rightfully put out in the Substack chat, that's why he's not in the national team, and is probably not going to get anywhere near that, considering how some of the other German strikers have done this weekend, right? So I think if you Hasenhüttl, you will think that was an unnecessary defeat, looking at the full 90 minutes. And if you Bayern Munich, you will look at this and say, well, we took the lead. We had we tried to put out a starting 11 and had some structure, and then Vincent Kompany in the second half, he just threw on all these guys, and I don't know. It just seemed like 11 players just trying to somehow win this game, right? Jamal Musiala and a bunch of other guys trying to outscore the opponent, and I don't know if that's going to be a winning recipe for the rest of the year. It seemed utterly chaotic what Bayern Munich were trying to do in the second half. It was all based on individual quality, trying to somehow see a result that trying to win a game that had slipped through their fingers. And that is, I think, going to be interesting to see, because if I remember correctly, Vincent Kompany was hired to give this team some structure. And I understand that the Olympics and the European Championships and all that kind of stuff made it difficult for preparation, right? But I don't think I saw any structure today, Stefan.
Yeah, I completely agree. Like, by the time Thomas Müller comes on in the 65th minute, Bayern are basically playing a sort of 4-1-5 sort of formation or something like it. I think we were discussing in the chat that our with our paid subscribers that I think at times Thomas Müller was playing in number 8. Jamal Musiala got booked late on in the game because he was being tasked with marking I think Meyer, the number 10 for Wolfsburg, and because he'd been pulled back to play kind of centre midfield, and it was this kind of really uncomposed, bizarre kind of make up as you go along that we did see from Tuchel a lot in the Bundesliga, and that was perhaps summed up perfectly well when Eric Dyer was brought on to replace Kim, who had a very tricky game.
That's kind.
Yeah. Exactly, and you know that's a whole other kind of subplot that we haven't even touched on. The fact that the first game back after De Ligt sold, Upamecano and Kim continued their Bambi on Ice production at the wasn't at the Allianz Arena, of course, in Wolfsburg. They're on tour with it. It would seem right now. It's just the complete opposite of what Bayern fans would have wanted to see. What they would have wanted to see is the new players doing well. They would have wanted to see Kompany prove that he can get these central defenders who the club spent a lot of money on and have now committed to after selling De Ligt. The Kompany is the man who can kindly turn them into great players. Again, Alphonso Davies was kind of left on that left wing doing nothing for much of the game. I actually thought Pavlovic and Kimmich were also very poor in the sense that neither of them really had any interest in dominating that game and controlling that game. Again, maybe that's down to fitness issues. Obviously, Palhinha, I'm assuming if he was fully fit, would have been starting in that position over one of them. And of course, we had a lot of kind of subscribers kind of crying out for Tell to be playing over Gnabry. So there's a lot of ifs and buts there. But I don't know. It's just I just keep coming back to this thought that, as we discussed in the previous show, I said when you look at the summer transfer business that Bayern have done, it doesn't feel like they've actually made a step forward. It feels like they've swapped a few players out for a few other players in, but on the whole, there's no net positive or negative about that team. And that performance today was exactly it. It was a performance that was the exact same as what we saw towards the end of last season. And yeah, they picked up 3 points, and they can kind of get on with it. And hopefully, you know, next time they play, the players will be fitter, they'll be sharper. And we'll see other players like Palhinha maybe come in and dominate the middle of the park and allow the team as a whole to be more composed, and hey, maybe he himself can actually allow Kim and Upamecano to play better as well. But it wasn't a great start to the season for Bayern, and it's not the performance that Kompany, Max Eberl, Freund or anyone would have wanted, because they would have hoped that this fixture would have been an easy start to the season and one that showcases the hard work they've done this summer.
Yeah, a couple of thoughts on, I think, what might be happening here. I think that, you know, maybe midfield, I wouldn't be surprised if it's going to be the two Ps, Pavlovic and Palhinha. I think that is a better combination. I think Kimmich, how long is it going to take until he's back at right back? Because I think he gives that defensive line a little bit more structure than Sasha Boy does. I think the days are gone where Bayern Munich can just play with this aggressive high line and dominate every single Bundesliga opponent, because the rest of the league has just caught up too much and the squad hasn't been improved enough. So I wonder how long it's going to take until we see Kimmich back on a right back position, which of course, you know, there were some suggestions that he should be the new national team captain. Happy now with Neuer, Gündogan, Groß and Müller all gone, and I'm not sold on that one bit, Stefan. I just don't think he is the one we tried that, right? That's been tried, and so I actually almost wonder if Pavlovic is the guy for the future, which I think is apparent that he is. Then you need to give him a partner that can play with long term, right? And that's not going to be Kimmich. I think that's going to be Palhinha, because Palhinha complements him better. Pavlovic is the possession guy, and Palhinha is sort of what Andrich did for the national team next to Kroos, right? He gives you that stability, that aggressiveness, that defensive mindedness. And then people might ask, well, what happens to Stanisic? I actually think Stanisic is going to take one of those centre-back positions when he comes back from his injury. And, I don't care which one of the two. I think both Upamecano and Kim were very poor. Kim had an absolute disaster. There was a few times where the camera panned in on him and he just looked lost. He looked like he won a raffle to be on the pitch there. And that's harsh, but, that's the reality of it right now. Like, at some point last year, because he had a strong start for the season, I'm not going to rewrite history here, right? He had a really strong start last year under Thomas Tuchel. And then at some point, right around the Asia Cup, he just lost this game. And I don't know what needs to happen for that for him to get that back. But right now, he just looks like he's lost. Half the time he's on the field, he loses his man markers. There's a lot of his head moving left and right and trying to figure out where he's at. That's usually a bad sign. And that's, I don't know how Bayern are going to fix. They can't fix it short term. I don't think there's enough time to find a new centre back, because I think that's off the table, and Stanisic isn't coming back for the next few weeks, right? So that's going to be a really difficult task to solve in the short term.
Yeah, I mean, I think if I was to kind of offer some kind of consolation for Bayern fans, which is a weird thing to say since they actually did win the game, it is that, you could see that Kompany was clearly trying to set the team up in a way that would allow both Bowie on the right and Davies on the left to really bomb forward as wing-backs, which really required one of the central midfielders to kind of drop in alongside Upamecano and Kim and to form a kind of back three. Didn't really seem to work tremendously well with either Kimmich or Pavlovic, but obviously Palhinha is a player that can do that really well. So I think in terms of the tactics and the way this team play, it probably is worth kind of holding out to see what they look like with Palhinha in the team, because if you suddenly have a defensive midfielder who's kind of covering both those central defenders, they all of a sudden don't look exposed. All of a sudden, Kim has someone to pass to, because the time he gets caught in possession and leads to the Wolfsburg goals, the one that everyone will see this weekend. But there's another one where he passed the ball to Upamecano under pressure, and Upamecano basically got caught immediately. And you could see in even situations like that where they desperately need a midfielder in there who can just come and collect the ball off them, much like Pascal Gross has already started doing for Dortmund, actually. And so it felt like an entire system built around one player, and that one player wasn't in the team. So we'll have to wait and see what happens. But I mean, in terms of other positives, I thought Harry Kane, I know he said he missed the chances, but I thought his build-up play was very good. I thought Luciano looked decent for large stretches of the game. And I thought Michael Olise, when he looked fit and when he looked sharp, was probably Bayern's best player in attack. So I think there's a lot for Bayern to take positively from that game, but it's just, I guess, the jury's still out for now, which, as it should be, really 1 week into the season.
I think Kane could be an issue for Bayern this year. He looked slow at times. And in a league where everyone presses so high and everything is about pace and counter-pressing and fast attacking plays, let's see. I mean, he's also played a long tournament, right? For the third time in 4 years. It's a lot of football. So we'll see how that body holds up.